The Nuggets won looked awesome without Jamal Murray, so of course that sparked all sorts of completely stupid questions, which we're going to talk about on today's show. We're also going to talk about, guess what, the bench again, specifically pace. This is a show about pace, about going through life at your pace, and how the Nuggets have a really hard time getting on the same one. Plus, we'll do some predictions for the homestand. This is No Jinx on Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and making us your first listen. We really appreciate you guys being an everyday or checking out this show Monday through Friday. We try and bring you as much content as possible. We'll have post-game bonus episodes all throughout this homestand for the Denver Nuggets. Hope you guys tune in, hit the like and subscribe button on youtube.com/LockedOnNuggets and give us those 5-star reviews. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more with FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name's Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network. I'm co-host of Locked On NBA Monday through Friday in the afternoons over at youtube.com/LockedOnNBA. His name's Ryan Blackburn. He's over at Mile High Sports. You can catch him on the Pickaxe and Roll podcast and on Twitter at NBA Blackburn. This is No Jinx for Monday. Appreciate you guys being with us here on today's show. We'll give you some predictions for the homestand as the Nuggets take on not a tough team on Monday, but one that they struggled with in Toronto. But then, yeah, it's a murderer's row the rest of the week, and we'll take a look at what those matchups look like and our predictions for the homestand after they get started with a win versus the Jazz. You can catch that post-game show in your feeds right now. We're also going to talk about the bench, and I don't know if you know this, but Russell Westbrook can't shoot, so we're going to talk about that because I have to vent Ryan from time to time, or he will explode from having Russell Westbrook on this team and missing so many shots.
That's not what I put it there for, but that's fine.
But it's true. It's a little true.
I mean, look, it's a little true. I here's the thing. I just want him to make good decisions, and that's the thing that I really get bothered with at times. When I like the process, I think that the process is very important for this Nuggets team, and when the process is a 20-foot pull-up jumper, it's just not really jiving with me that much.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. When they signed Russell Westbrook, I was like, oh, I'm going to have to listen to Ryan the whole year, hating every second of this experience. I don't blame him. There's guys that drive me nuts that I mean, to be honest with you, it's like the Nuggets employed one. He was from Argentina and it didn't go well.
Hey, you and me both, brother. Let me just point to it over here.
We're going to start, though, with a conversation which I think is actually kind of interesting. So the Nuggets get the win without Jamal Murray on Saturday. And, of course, anytime the team wins without a player, it's like, oh, are they better without? And blah, blah, blah. And, like, the comments are full of those. Like, Noah's in here saying, I think it'll be easier to win without him than with him. And there's actually a pretty good reason for backing Noah's logic, but it's not because of the reasons that Noah tends to think it is. It's something different. I'll come back to that. But one thing I did kind of notice was when we were kind of looking at stuff, somebody mentioned that Ryan was at the game and he was like, I just can't deal with this. And he was, venting about somebody talking about how they just grind the ball to dust when Jamal is there. And I did. And I genuinely, this was not like a trolling thing. I always believe that if you're presented with something that you don't agree with, that you should check to see if it's true. Like, you should go find out, like, what do the facts say? Because if you have the facts on your side, then you can be like, that's actually not accurate. This is not the way it is. But a lot of times the perception that we have doesn't match reality when we start to get to it. It's why I care about numbers, is like, I can feel however I want. But if the numbers are like, that's not true, it's either that there's something in the numbers that isn't being reflected by that number. There's like a third confounding variable. Happens a lot. Or my perception's wrong. And one of the things that, like I said, was like, all right, let's not go to like good or bad with Jamal. Let's just talk about pace. Like, what's the pace with and without Jamal? And one of the interesting things is this season, the pace is a lot slower whenever Jamal's on the floor. When Jamal Murray is on the court this season, they have the slowest pace of when any player on the Nuggets is on the court at 96.82. When Jamal is off the court, they have the third highest pace of whenever any player is off the court at 107.1.
Yeah.
That's ahead of where it is with Jokić. So they actually play faster without Jamal than without Nikola Jokić, which is really kind of surprising. Mahrez has commented from time to time that this bugs him, that Jamal is a little bit of a bring it up or a staller.
Yeah.
And I don't find Jamal to be as bad as John Wall was always the one that bugged me the most. John was like the most athletic guys I'd ever seen. And John didn't want to start possessions until 11 seconds on the shot clock, and it drove me insane. Jamal's not that bad, but I also don't think that Jamal is like pushing pace to get into sets either. I've talked for a long time. So like, Ryan, what's kind of your thought on this actual question of pace isn't good or bad, but just qualitatively, they are playing really slow with Jamal. It's understandable why they're not playing slow with him when he's not on the floor, because somebody else is.
Yeah.
But what are your kind of thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think anecdotally, it's funny this season. I feel like he has pushed the ball up the floor off of makes a little bit quicker than he did the previous year. Last year, it was very noticeable just how slow he was getting into sets. He was always trying to take the ball up the floor, and he was always trying to break the press, and it always took him 8 full seconds to get up the court, and then they would start the set at 13, pretty close to 11. And that's never going to help your team. Fortunately, the Nuggets have Jokić, and so you can get away with that a lot more. But I think what Adam and what a lot of folks would like to see is for Denver to generate more advantages. And so far this year, I mean, you could just look at Jamal's overall numbers. He's been bad. And the numbers have not been good enough for him to say, yeah, I've really generated a lot of advantages for this team. He just hasn't. And there's a lot of times where he isn't super responsible for that. Like, he'll play off the ball a little bit more, especially if they're going into the post a little bit more. He does a good job of feeding Joker. He always makes sure to get him touches where he needs them. And that's one thing that you noticed at the end of the Minnesota game when he wasn't there. It's that sometimes the ball doesn't always find Joker on time. And Murray, I think, does a pretty good job more often than not of getting it to him in the half court. But it is in the half court. It's not transition. It's not very fast. And that can rub some people the wrong way.
Yeah, and again, like, pace isn't good or bad. But I do have this kind of just off the top of my head as we were talking about this. Here is like a corollary thought. What are the most important minutes for the Nuggets?
They're the Jokić minutes.
Okay. Shouldn't you want as many of those as possible? So if one of the problems is trying to survive the bench, right? Like, you're trying to survive the bench minutes. What if a good way to do that is just limit the number of bench possessions so you lose by a slower pace and have more Jokić possessions, because every single Jokić possession is so much better?
It's a great idea. And I think it makes sense. Where the theory falls a little flat is with as much burden as Jokić is carrying. If you make him play 36 minutes a game at that pace versus the one where they're a snail's pace and he gets to walk up and down the floor a little bit more frequently, doesn't have to work as hard in those possessions or in as many possessions as possible, that will save Denver over the course of an entire season. That'll help keep Jokić fresh for the playoffs, help keep the Nuggets fresh for the playoffs. And yet, like, Jokić is not really the one that I'm worried about here, because he'll be fine. He'll figure it out. And I just don't like the theory that he's tired, exhausted. He doesn't always show it that much. Like, even when he's tired and exhausted, he's still going to give you 30, 20, and 10. So I think that theory falls a little bit flat for me as well.
Yeah. I think the question of, like, can he keep up that pace is a pretty good one. Just from a does he want to standpoint.
Sure.
My only thing is that I think Jamal needs to be as much like Tony Parker as possible. And Tony Parker was awesome at, after makes, Tony pushed the ball up and got them into sets at 18 seconds. Like, you have a better offense. You know you have the better offense. make them work for longer on those possessions. Now, all of this is like secondary because it's like, look, here's we talked about facts. Here are the facts. With Nikola Jokić and Jamal Murray on the floor without Russell Westbrook, they have a 132.7 offensive rating. That's hotter than the sun.
Wow.
Yeah. With Russell Westbrook and Nikola Jokić without Jamal Murray, it goes to 109. Now the defense drops by almost as much. Like Jokić and Russ are only a point worse in net rating than Jokić and Jamal, which is a credit to like Russ's impact on the defensive end and what they're doing there. It really is, especially with how bad Russ's offense has been. But you can't really sit here and be like, Jamal hurts the offense. They have a 132 offensive rating when Jamal and Nikola are on the floor this season.
It's hard to argue against that number.
That's a fact.
And I know that Murray has not started the season that great. Like, what is he shooting? 35% from the field or whatever. He's got to be better individually. There's no doubt about it. But what he does do is take away some of the responsibility of creating everything. And that allows everybody else a little bit of an easier job at times.
On the other side, I'm going to let Ryan talk about how much Russell Westbrook's shot sucks. And then we're going to talk about the bench and their pace. And if there's a way to kind of how does the bench need to play, I think is the big question. We'll talk about that up next here on Locked On Nuggets. Today's show is brought to you by BetterHelp. BetterHelp is the absolute best company that you're going to be able to find for finding the right therapist for you. This month's all about gratitude in November. And along with the person that, I think for me, the person I'm most grateful for, my wife's been phenomenal. I've got a lot of job stuff going on, and she has been a rock, like through absolutely everything that's going on with me with my mom, and I got job stuff. Like she has just been totally the rock that I've needed, and she's been absolutely phenomenal. This month's all about gratitude, and along with the person I just shouted out, there's another person we don't get to think enough, and that's ourselves. It's sometimes hard to remind ourselves that we're trying our best to make sense of everything, and in this crazy world, that isn't easy. Oh boy, the timing. Here's a reminder to send some thanks to the people in your life, including yourself. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for joining us. You should check out LockedOnDaily.com. It's where you can find our daily Locked On Nuggets newsletter. Get signed up. Subscribe to that puppy. I will have one tonight that's going to be recapping kind of the thoughts on this episode as well as some other thoughts. I'll have a post-game episode, post-game newsletter tomorrow night for Tuesday as well. So you're going to have lots of content in your inbox every day from me and Ryan, recapping the stuff that's going on with the Nuggets, our thoughts on everything. Check it out at LockedOnDaily.com. Okay. So I think that we're talking about pace, and you got this really interesting question in here, which is, can the Nuggets bench keep up? And I want you to kind of talk about what you're thinking of there.
Yeah. So one of the things that we talked about before the show, just Russell Westbrook plays very fast. You shared the numbers, you shared the pace. He likes to play fast. He likes to get Denver moving. And I think that there are guys that are kind of accustomed to it. Peyton Watson, Julian Strawther. And then sometimes Denver will stagger Michael Porter Jr. He can keep up in certain situations, but sometimes he also likes to be a little bit more half court. And then there's Dario Saric and DeAndre Jordan. And I don't think that either of those guys operate at a fast pace that well. Now, your center doesn't always have to. There's no doubt about it. But it does put a lot of pressure when not all of your guys can run, not all of your guys can keep up. And then I think it's put a lot of pressure on Peyton Watson, especially this year, where he's not getting a ton of opportunities on a game-to-game basis. And when he gets out in transition, he wants to attack. He wants to get into the deep of the defense, draw some fouls. And it's led to some really bad possessions from him. And you sometimes are going to get these possessions where guys are trying too hard to keep up with Russell Westbrook. He can do it because he is Russell Westbrook. Sometimes he'll kick the ball off of his shin and it'll go out of bounds. But there are most of those possessions where Russ is pushing the tempo, where he can find an open shooter. He can find a good shot for a lot of people. but it takes a lot out of these guys, especially young guys. So I'm just very curious as to what the right pace is for this bench and whether like Russ and Dario Saric and DeAndre Jordan can really balance out each other, or if it's never going to fit at all.
Yeah. So it was honestly, I think it was an oversight on our part. Cause like I talked a little bit about how in the summer about how well Russ has played with, Steven Adams, who's more of a pinch post guy.
Yeah.
And he's played with like pure rim rollers like Clint Capella, etc. But one thing we didn't really talk about was just like, can they match up on pace? Can they figure out how to play together?
Yeah.
Denver got Russell Westbrook because Nikola Jokić wanted him, and it's like the veteran. Like, let's get the veteran guy, right? So they go out and they get like Jokić wants him. They go out and get a backup point guard. They move off of Reggie, and the idea is like Russ. And then they go out and get Dario because it's like they can get Dario. This is, I will say, something that kind of gets lost. There's this idea that like all 30 NBA teams have all of the free agents at their disposal.
Yeah.
And they can just pick and choose.
Never.
And that's not how this works. Like not even the money side of this, right? It is, are you willing to go to that team? Whether it's because of the city, your wife wants to live in a certain area, right? Like Elton Brand literally left the Clippers where he was like the franchise guy and went to Philly because his wife wanted to move back east. Like that's why he went.
Also, just think about the pressure that there is to play backup center in Denver, of all places, where you're going from the 3-time MVP, the franchise, the best player in the world, to you, and like everybody's going to point to you if things go wrong. Everybody.
And they are.
Yes, they are.
So, but I do think that just like Russ is such a north-south player. Like that's who he, especially when Jokić is not on the floor. Like he's just north-south. You see all the different stuff when Jokic's on the floor.
Yeah.
Like you see all the versatility. Like those minutes are looking better and better. And this is honestly like when Noah said to start the show, Noah was like, I think it'll be easier to win without Jamal than with him. The only reason that actually might be true here is because you do not have the Russell Westbrook without Nikola minutes as often. Because those minutes are abysmal. And if Russ is just playing with Jokić more, you have fewer of the worst minutes, which are Russ without Nikola.
Yeah.
Which are disasters. But as far as like Dario goes, he and Westbrook, I don't know. I've tried to ask about this a little bit to Malone, and he's mentioned post-ups. And I want to be clear on this. Like when Malone said we want to get Dario on post-ups, I was like, that's not what you want to do. Like, are you insane? You want to get Dario Saric on post-ups? And then again, that's my perception. So I looked up the numbers. Dario Saric was 80th percentile last season on post-ups. He was 68th percentile the season before. Like, he's actually been really effective.
It's pretty good.
He's been garbage with Denver. And so the question there is, okay, did Dario lose the ability to make turnaround hook shots? Is the spacing compacted because of that second unit, which is where I kind of lean? Or is Dario just missing? Right? So
yeah. Like, you know who was running last night really well was Zeke Naji in garbage time. Look, that's not me.
Do you want to run post-ups for Zeke?
No, that is for some reason, I don't think that Russ is going to go to Zeke in the post that often. But I think that like we talked about on the previous episode, I think that they're going to still keep going to Dario overall. I think we're getting a nice respite with DJ. And if he can give Denver some good minutes on this homestand, that is a good thing for Denver in the long term. I've also talked about this, that Dario Saric playing 82 games as the backup center is probably not good for Dario Saric either. Like, he's got to get some breaks. So this is a good opportunity for him to get his first break and understand that it doesn't have to be all the time when you're being excellent. And there's some good that can come out of this, hopefully. But I do think that it should be a 3-man race at backup center right now rather than a 2-man race. I just don't know if we're ever going to get there with Zeke.
Yeah, but we talked about the reasons for that too.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
So,
Russ field goal percentage. really
Yeah,
quick?
let's hit that. I'm gonna just like cede the floor to you to talk about this.
Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't bring this up. I saw this as a thing that keeps going around social media. It's the thing that all of the big accounts have picked up, that Russ's field goal percentage so far. I don't actually know what the number is because I believe it or not, I don't keep track of it all the time. I know people find that hard to believe sometimes, but Russ currently, I just looked it up, 23% from the field, 23.2%. That's obviously not good. And the way that he finished the playoffs last year against the Dallas Mavericks, he was at 26%. And there's just a part of me that is like, okay, this probably isn't going to continue. He's probably going to figure this out. I have no doubt that like he's going to work towards it. The Nuggets are going to work towards it. There's no doubt that they can figure it out overall. But it is something I'm going to watch because 23% is really bad. It is about as bad as it could possibly get. And it's just some of the shots and some of the choices that he has taken so far this year in terms of it's my time to go get the pull up too. It's my time to go into the post and take the fadeaway shot or drive into the man and try to draw a foul and then lose the ball. Like there have been some really odd decisions that have been made. And I know that that's mostly just Russell Westbrook's game, but I understand that like the big value that he can provide is in other areas on the court where he's facilitating, where he is playing defense. He has been really good defensively this year. He had 5 steals in this last game against the Utah Jazz, but like he still had 5 steals. It was crazy. And I hope that he can focus more on that rather than where his usage is at with Jokic at 30% without him on the floor.
So your thing is very purely just like take fewer shots, just don't shoot.
It's not just that. Like, I think he still needs to try to be aggressive going downhill, but with the intention of playmaking for others, with the intention of setting the table for guys like Dario to get Dario going, for guys like Hunter Tyson to get him open threes, for guys like Julian Strawther to keep getting him. Like, look at what Julian Strawther just did last night. He was dynamic. He was awesome. He hasn't gotten enough shots this year. That's on Russ as much as it is on anybody.
You want him to be more like Rondo.
There's part of me that says, yeah, I do.
I mean, look, I can't disagree because here's the thing. So dribble jumpers, he's 4 of 11 this season at 27%. He's 1 for 10 on catch and shoots.
Yeah.
1 for 11, I'm sorry. Like, those are quality shots for any player in the league, and he's 1 of 11. But here's the thing, is like getting downhill, he's 6 of 20. Like he's 6 of 20 on layup attempts.
That's insane to me. Like he is so athletic and so good in the open air that
he goes too fast. This has always been the thing, is like he goes too fast and then he misses it. And because he's slower, because he's older, he tries to make up for it by going harder, which only means he's got to be able like this has always been my thing with him, is not always in his later years, when you're having to push that hard, you physically and mentally can't make your body move quick enough to be able to get the touch on that ball to make that layup. And so yeah.
I want it to work, man. Like I really do. The way that he gets as much hate as he does everywhere else, like I want to see him be successful in Denver because it is a cool story to shove it in the face of the fans in LA and be like, yeah, dude, this guy is still very helpful and still very good.
But here's the thing. It's just like, you're going to talk about like he needs to do X, Y, or Z. And like his entire ethos is built on not changing and adapting. And that's a bummer to me because I just think as you get older, you should. Jason Kidd reinvented himself as a pure point guard that was a spot-up shooter.
Unbelievable player late in his career.
Yeah. And like if Russ had done that, I think he could have been great. But he wants to do everything on his terms. And he's willing to I will just say, like, he's willing to live with those consequences. And we'll see what happens.
There will be some if it doesn't shift at all. Because
will there be?
I mean, well, it's a good question, right? Like, is he going to play in the playoffs?
I don't think so, and I don't think he should. But
that's part of the consequence, I think.
On the other side, we'll wrap up. We'll talk about the upcoming homestand. We'll get into those games and what we're expecting from the Nuggets as they take on several really good teams here over the next week. We'll do that up next here on Locked On Nuggets. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. I had Broncos today.
I took Broncos too because of you.
I don't know what to say. I'm just really shocked. It's really, I mean, Lamar Jackson, I think, had 13 straight completions. It's really crazy considering I know that the Broncos employ the best cornerback in the entire universe. It's really odd that they just Lamar just torched them from end to end to end. It's weird. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us. Final segment here on No Jinx with you on a Monday. Ryan, the Denver Nuggets take on the Toronto Raptors on Monday night. I'll have a post-game show for you. I'm not making this one. I got some stuff I got to take care of. But Ryan will be there. And then on Wednesday, that's when the hard part comes in. That's when the games get a little bit more serious. They've got the Thunder again on Wednesday. Round 2 versus OKC, who is an absolute wagon right now, tearing through the league. On Friday, they take on the Miami Heat, who aren't, I don't think, really good, and I don't even know if I'd say good, but they're always going to be tough because of the style and Eric Spoelstra and all that. And Bam has gotten a little bit better, I think, at defending Jokić every single time he faces him. Then on Sunday, they take on the Dallas Mavericks in the first meeting between those two teams this season before Cup play starts the following week on Friday. They got days off before that, which is awesome.
They got 4 days off after this homestand.
I know. I'm like, they're gonna get to practice. This is amazing. So they're 1-0 on the homestand. Raptors, Thunder, Heat, Mavericks. What are you expecting for this record stretch to be?
Man, so here's the funny thing. I told you 5-5 at the beginning, and I think that we're about there, right? Like a 3-3 now. This is a tough stretch. It's all at home, so Denver has an opportunity really to make the most of this. And I do think that they get it done against Toronto. OKC, I am just never going to predict a Nuggets win against OKC at this point in the regular season. We are going to have to wait and see if Denver can match up with them going forward, because they showed up Denver and took them to task at home. It was not close. And that to me is a very interesting sign about where Denver's at and where OKC is at least it was in game 1. Denver has improved every game since then, but I still don't think that they are at the level that where they can seriously challenge what OKC is doing. And then Miami, Dallas, I think they probably split between those two. It's not a cup game against Dallas. The cup game will be a couple weeks after. So I got to imagine that Dallas going on the road, they may not be trying as hard in that one as they will in the cup game specifically. We'll see. We'll see what it looks like, but I'm feeling pretty comfortable at 2-2 for this upcoming stretch.
I think they got a shot at 3-1. I think they win Raptors and Heat. I think the Mavericks is the swing game.
Yeah.
Now look, OKC, that feels to me like a very prototypical, OKC killed them in the first meeting. OKC's red hot. Everyone's doubting Denver. And then all of a sudden it's 107, 104 Denver. The problem is just the bench depth. That to me is the issue is the only way you win that Thunder game is if you break out a playoff rotation. You really can't do that at this point in the season, especially coming off of a back-to-back after 2 overtime games in your first road trip. This is not a great schedule spot. I think taking care of business versus the Raptors is important. Okay, you went to overtime with them in Toronto. This needs to be more like the Jazz game, right? They're without Scotty Barnes for the duration. This needs to be a much closer game to what Utah was. And Toronto's better than Utah, but not by a lot. Miami honestly should be a pretty solid win. I just don't think Miami's very good. I just don't.
Yeah, they also just don't have great depth. That's the other thing that really stands out with them. There are guys that can come off their bench and be pretty good, but between that and Jimmy Butler just not really reaching the level consistently, I think that they have a very low ceiling for a team.
Let's say they beat the Raptors, because if they don't beat the Raptors, it's just like okay. And we'll deal with that tomorrow night. If they go 1-3 here and they fall to 4-6, I still don't know if that's like real panic time.
No, because like, again, you're facing some pretty good teams. OKC, what are people going to, I mean, people will criticize because they'll criticize, but I won't criticize Denver overly for losing to OKC. If they lose and get blown out again, then I will. But if these games are competitive and they just lose them, then what I'm gonna look at it. I'm gonna try to detail it and figure out, okay, where are the breakdowns coming from? Where can they continue to improve? And now we've got a 10-game sample size at the end of that. What needs to happen? What needs to change? And the hope is that there is something that you'll be able to identify and change. And it's not just, we got to rely on these 9 guys and they may not be good enough. When Murray comes back will be very interesting. I don't know. Like you said, he might, like, I think they detailed and said he was out for tomorrow against Toronto. If he plays against OKC, that'll be interesting. If he plays against Miami, that'll be interesting. The Dallas one is like, we've seen what happens against OKC so far. I'm not as interested in that one. I am interested in seeing how they match up with Dallas. I want to see what they look like against that offense and whether they can defend any semblance of that.
I don't think you should punt on the OKC game.
Not punting, but just in terms of like, I don't have high expectations for that one.
Yeah. Jamal is listed out in concussion protocol. I will say, like, he can clear that.
Yeah.
I would because they've already listed him out. I would go ahead and say that the odds are like 30% that he plays tomorrow night. And also, I don't know that you need him to play. Like, you just probably don't need him versus the Raptors.
Absolutely.
And so be cautious with it. And then, but I would say 70% he plays versus OKC. Like, I think it's very likely that he plays.
If they are going to win, then he has to play.
Malone said he was doing cardio the other night, which means he's able to participate in return to play protocol.
Yeah.
So, I expect him to be back for the OKC game. If he's not, that doesn't mean that like he did anything. Like, just the concussions, man. It took me 6 months to recover from a concussion. I got in a car wreck, so it's tough.
What for you? Like, what's the panic level for you if they go 1-3 and they lose those 3 tougher home games?
What's
the panic level for you if they go 1-3?
It's still pretty low.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, again, 4-6 is like, all right, you're fine. They had to get those Raptors and Nets games on the road.
Yeah.
If they lose to Toronto tomorrow night and beat OKC, it's fine. If they lose to Toronto and they beat the Mavericks, it's fine. If they lose to Toronto and beat Miami, it's going to be like, so now you're losing to bad teams and good teams, but you beat the mediocre one. I don't know what that says. So that's where I would kind of be at. We'll see where they end up. That's going to do it for Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow night for a post-game episode after the Raptors game. Then Swipe will be with you on Tuesday to give you his thoughts on where the team is at. And then we'll do No Jinx again on Wednesday. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys again next time here on Locked On Nuggets.